My brother's family photoshopped me out of every single picture from his daughter's wedding. They posted the entire album online with the caption, "Our perfect day surrounded by family only." I had paid for half of that wedding. I had spent 6 months helping plan every detail, from the flowers to the seating chart to the playlist for the reception. I had walked into that country club believing I was a cherished member of this family, and 2 weeks later, I discovered I had been digitally erased, like I was never there at all. I didn't call them screaming. I didn't show up at their door demanding answers. I simply went quiet. I stopped reaching out, stopped checking in, stopped being the person who always showed up, no matter how I was treated. For 6 months, I waited. Then one evening in February, my phone rang. It was my brother Gerald, and he was sobbing so hard I could barely understand him. He told me they were about to lose their house. The bank had sent a foreclosure notice. They had 30 days to come up with $40,000 or everything would be gone. "Francine, please," he begged. "You're the only one who can help us. We're family." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. Then I said calmly, "I'm sorry. Who is this?" Gerald stopped crying. "What? It's me. It's your brother." "I don't know anyone by that name," I said. "You must have the wrong number." He screamed into the phone. "You can't just pretend you don't know us." But that's exactly what they had done to me. My name is Francine, and I turned 55 last summer. I never got married and I never had children, but that didn't mean I lived my life alone. I spent 40 years being the backbone of my family. I was the one who answered the phone at 2 in the morning when someone needed help. I was the one who wrote the checks and never asked to be paid back. I was the one who showed up for every birthday, every holiday, every crisis, no matter how inconvenient it was for me. My younger brother Gerald was born 3 years after me. We grew up in a small town in Indiana, in a house that always felt a little too cold in winter and a little too hot in summer. Our parents didn't have much, but they raised us to believe that family was everything. When our father died 15 years ago, I was the one who paid for the funeral because Gerald said he couldn't afford it. When our mother needed to move into assisted living, I was the one who handled all the paperwork and covered the costs until we could sell her house. I never complained. I never kept score. I just did what needed to be done because that's what family does. Gerald married a woman named Suzette when he was 26 years old. She came from a family that used to have money but lost it somewhere along the way, and she carried herself like someone who believed the world owed her better. From the very first time I met her, I could tell she didn't like me. She smiled at me with her mouth, but not her eyes. She made little comments about my clothes, my job, my unmarried status, always phrased like jokes but sharp enough to sting. Over the years, Suzette found small ways to push me to the edges of the family. She planned holiday dinners and forgot to tell me the time. She organized birthday parties for her daughter and mentioned them to me only after they had already happened. She told Gerald I was too involved, that I needed to give them space, that my presence made her uncomfortable. Gerald never defended me. Whenever I tried to talk to him about it, he would shrug and say, "That's just how Suzette is. Try not to take it personally." But I did take it personally. I just never said so. They had one daughter together, my niece Bethany. From the moment that little girl was born, I loved her with everything I had. I babysat her when Gerald and Suzette needed a night out. I paid for her dance lessons when they said money was tight. I helped cover the cost of her braces. When she got accepted to college, I quietly wrote a check for her entire first year of tuition and told her it was a gift. Bethany called me her favorite aunt, even though I was her only aunt. She hugged me at every family gathering and told me she loved me. I believed her. I believed that even if Gerald and Suzette saw me as an outsider, at least Bethany understood how much I cared. When Bethany got engaged to a young man named Trent, She asked me to help plan the wedding. I was so honored I almost cried. For the next 6 months, I poured myself into every detail. I helped her choose the venue, a beautiful country club just outside Indianapolis with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a golf course. I coordinated with florists and caterers and photographers. I sat with her for hours addressing invitations by hand because she wanted that personal touch. Halfway through the planning, Gerald pulled me aside and told me they couldn't afford the reception Bethany had her heart set on. Without hesitating, I offered to pay for half, $22,000. I didn't ask for recognition or even a thank you. I just wanted Bethany to have the wedding she dreamed of. The day of the wedding was everything we had planned. White roses everywhere, a string quartet during the ceremony, a live band that kept people dancing until midnight. I sat at the family table during dinner, right next to Gerald. I gave a toast that made Bethany cry happy tears. I danced with my brother for the first time since we buried our mother. For one perfect night, I felt like I truly belonged. 2 weeks later, I learned how wrong I was. Subscribe for more stories and tell me where you're watching from. I was sitting at my kitchen table on a Saturday morning when I first saw the photo. I had just poured my second cup of coffee and was scrolling through my phone the way I always did, checking messages and catching up on what people had posted overnight. When I saw that Bethany had uploaded the professional wedding picture, I smiled and tapped on the album immediately. The first few images were beautiful. Bethany in her dress looking radiant. Trent waiting at the altar with tears in his eyes. The ceremony beneath the archway of white roses I had helped select. I scrolled slowly, savoring each picture and remembering how magical that day had felt. Then I reached the group photos. The first one was the full family portrait, the one we had taken right after the ceremony on the steps of the country club. I remembered standing there in my deep blue dress, squeezed between Gerald and Bethany's grandmother on Trent's side. I remembered the photographer telling us to move closer together. I remembered smiling so hard my cheeks hurt, but in the photo on my screen, I wasn't there. I stared at it for a long moment, confused. I zoomed in and looked at the spot where I should have been standing. The spacing between Gerald and the grandmother was slightly off. There was a faint blur along the edges where two separate images had been stitched together. The background behind them looked soft and smudged in a way that didn't match the rest of the picture. I scrolled to the next group photo. The same thing. And the next. And the next. In every single image where I should have appeared, I had been removed. Not cropped out, not accidentally left out of the frame, digitally erased. Someone had taken the time to carefully edit me out of every photograph and then uploaded them for the world to see. The caption at the top of the album read, "Our perfect day, surrounded by family only." I set my phone down on the table and sat there in silence. My coffee went cold. The morning light shifted across the kitchen floor. I didn't move. That afternoon, I called Gerald. My hands were trembling as I held the phone to my ear. "Hey, Francine," he said casually when he picked up. "What's going on? Did you see the wedding photos Bethany posted?" "Yeah, they turned out great. The photographer really knew what he was doing." I took a breath. "I'm not in any of them, Gerald. She edited me out of every single picture." There was a pause. I heard him shift the phone from one ear to the other. "Oh," he said. "Yeah, Suzette thought it would look better with just immediate family. You know how she is about these things. She didn't want the photos to look cluttered." Cluttered. That was the word he used, like I was a piece of furniture that had accidentally ended up in the background. "I helped plan that wedding," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I paid for half of it. I stood in those photos, and now I've been erased like I was never there." "Francine, come on. It's not that big a deal. They're just pictures." "They're not just pictures, Gerald. They're memories, and apparently I'm not allowed to be part of them." He sighed, like I was being dramatic. "Look, I don't know what you want me to say. It was Suzette's decision. Talk to her if you have a problem with it." I waited for him to say something. else, to apologize, to tell me he disagreed with what his wife had done, to acknowledge that erasing his sister from his daughter's wedding album was cruel and wrong. But he just cleared his throat and said, "I gotta go. We're heading out to dinner. I'll talk to you later." He hung up before I could respond. I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time after that call. I kept thinking about all the years I had spent showing up for this family, the money I had given, the time I had sacrificed, the holidays I had traveled across the state to attend even when I was exhausted. All of it. Every bit of it. And this was how they saw me. As someone who could be edited out when convenient. As someone who wasn't really family after all. I picked up my phone and looked at the photos one more time. Then I closed the app and made a decision. For the next several days, I kept waiting for someone to reach out. I thought maybe Bethany would call to apologize, to explain that Suzette had pressured her into making those edits, and she felt terrible about it. I thought maybe Gerald would come to his senses and realize how hurtful his words had been. I even thought Suzette herself might send some kind of message, if only to justify what she had done. But nothing came. My phone stayed silent. My email was empty. Life continued for them as if erasing me from their family history was perfectly acceptable. I spent a lot of time that week sitting in my living room thinking about what to do next. Part of me wanted to drive over to Gerald's house and confront them face to face. I imagined standing in their living room and demanding answers. I imagined telling Suzette exactly what I thought of her after 25 years of being treated like an inconvenience. I imagined making them feel even a fraction of the hurt I was carrying. But then I asked myself what that would actually accomplish. Would Suzette suddenly apologize and mean it? Would Gerald finally stand up for me after decades of choosing her side? Would Bethany admit that she had been wrong and beg for my forgiveness? I already knew the answers. Nothing would change. They would make excuses, shift the blame, tell me I was overreacting. Gerald had already called me cluttered. He had already said it wasn't a big deal. Confronting them would only give them a chance to make me feel like the problem. So I decided to do something different. I decided to stop. I stopped calling Gerald on Sunday afternoons like I had done for years. I stopped texting Bethany to ask about her honeymoon. I stopped sending cards for birthdays and anniversaries. I stopped checking in to see if anyone needed anything. For the first time in my adult life, I simply stepped back and let the silence speak for itself. At first it felt strange. I had spent so many years being the one who held the family together that I didn't know who I was without that role. I would reach for my phone to call Gerald and then stop myself, remembering that he didn't deserve my effort anymore. I would start writing a message to Bethany and then delete it, knowing she had made her choice when she posted those photos. The weeks turned into months. Occasionally, Gerald's name would pop up on my phone with a missed call. Once or twice, Bethany sent a text asking if everything was okay. I didn't respond to any of it. I just let the silence grow. What surprised me was how little they pushed. If I had truly mattered to them, wouldn't they have tried harder to reach me? Wouldn't they have shown up at my door or sent a letter or done something to find out why I had suddenly gone quiet? But they didn't. A few half-hearted attempts, and then nothing. That told me everything I needed to know. During those 6 months, I focused on my own life for the first time in as long as I could remember. I spent time with friends who actually wanted my company. I took a trip to the coast by myself and watched the ocean for hours without thinking about anyone else's needs. I read books and cooked meals and went to bed without my phone buzzing with requests for help. I learned that I had been so busy taking care of everyone else that I had forgotten what it felt like to take care of myself. By February, I had almost made peace with the idea that Gerald and his family were no longer part of my life. The hurt was still there, buried deep, but it had started to fade around the edges. I was beginning to imagine a future where I didn't carry them with me anymore. Then, one cold evening, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Gerald's name. I almost let it go to voicemail like I had done so many times before, but something made me answer. When I heard my brother sobbing on the other end of the line, I knew immediately that this wasn't a social call. Gerald could barely get the words out. His voice was thick with tears, broken up by jagged breaths that made him sound like a child instead of a grown man in his 50s. "Francine, we're in trouble," he said. "We're about to lose the house." I sat down slowly on my couch and listened as he tried to explain. Suzette had lost her job 8 months ago, right around the time of Bethany's wedding. She hadn't told Gerald how bad things were. She had been hiding bills, making minimum payments, letting everything pile up while pretending everything was fine. By the time Gerald found out the truth, they were already 3 months behind on the mortgage. "The bank sent a foreclosure notice," he said. "We have 30 days to come up with almost $40,000, or they're taking the house. I've called everyone I can think of. No one can help. You're the only one." I held the phone against my ear and stared at the wall across from me. I thought about all the times I had come running when Gerald needed something. The funeral costs, the tuition payments, the wedding expenses. Every single time, I had opened my checkbook without hesitation, because that's what family did. But family was supposed to go both ways. "Francine, please," Gerald begged. "I know things have been weird lately, but this is serious. We could end up on the street. Bethany is devastated. Suzette hasn't stopped crying in days. We need you." I let the silence stretch out between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm and even. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" Gerald stopped crying. For a moment there was nothing on the line but the sound of his breathing. "What did you say?" "I said I'm sorry, but I don't recognize this number. You must have the wrong person." "Francine, this isn't funny. It's me. It's Gerald, your brother." "I don't have a brother," I said. "I'm family only, remember? And apparently I'm not part of that." I could hear him struggling to understand what was happening. His confusion turned to anger in the span of a few seconds. "You can't be serious right now. We're about to lose everything. And you're playing games because of some pictures? That was months ago. You need to get over it." "Get over it," I repeated. "You edited me out of your daughter's wedding. You let your wife erase me from every memory of that day. I paid for half of that wedding, Gerald. I spent 6 months helping plan every detail. And when I called you to ask why I had been removed from the photos, you told me I was cluttered. You said it wasn't a big deal." "It wasn't a big deal," he shouted. "They were just pictures. This is our house. This is our lives. How can you even compare the two?" "Because it's not about the pictures," I said. "It's about what the pictures meant. It's about 30 years of me showing up for this family and being treated like I don't matter. It's about Suzette pushing me out at every turn while you stood by and let her do it. It's about the fact that for 6 months, not one of you bothered to find out why I stopped calling. You didn't notice I was gone until you needed something from me." Gerald was quiet. I could hear Suzette saying something in the background, her voice sharp and demanding. "Mom would be ashamed of you," Gerald finally said. "She raised us to take care of each other. She would never turn her back on family like this." "Mom also raised us to treat people with respect," I said. "She would have never let her sister be erased from a family photo and then told her it didn't matter. Don't use her memory to guilt me into cleaning up your mess." He started to say something else, but I cut him off. "I hope you find a way to save your house. I really do. But you're not going to find it here. You told me I wasn't family, Gerald. You showed me exactly where I stood. I'm just finally believing you." I hung up the phone before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt strangely still. I set the phone down on the coffee table and sat there in the quiet of my living room, letting the weight of what I had just done settle over me. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. Gerald and Suzette lost their house 2 months later. I heard about it through a distant cousin who still kept in touch with both sides of the family. She told me they had moved into a small rental apartment across town, that Suzette blamed me for everything, that Gerald refused to speak my name. I won't pretend that news didn't affect me. I sat with it for a long time, turning it over in my mind, wondering if I had made the right choice. There were nights I woke up at 3 in the morning, replaying that phone call, asking myself if I should have just written the check and kept the peace the way I always had. But then I would remember the blur where my face used to be. I would remember Gerald calling me cluttered. I would remember 6 months of silence, of being forgotten, until there was a crisis only my money could solve. And I knew I had done what I needed to do. A few months after they lost the house, Bethany reached out to me. She sent a long message through social media, the first real communication I had received from her since the wedding photos went up. She said she was sorry. She said Suzette had pressured her into making the edits, and she had been too afraid to say no. She said she missed me and wanted to find a way to repair our relationship. I read that message several times before I responded. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to tell her everything was fine and we could go back to the way things were. I had loved that girl since the day she was born. Holding on to anger toward her felt like carrying a weight I didn't want anymore. But I also knew that forgiveness without accountability was just permission to hurt me again. I wrote back and told her I appreciated her apology. I told her I understood that standing up to Suzette wasn't easy and that I didn't hold the pressure she was under against her. But I also told her that trust takes time to rebuild. I told her I needed to see real change before I could let her back into my life. Not just words, but actions that showed she valued me as more than someone who paid for things. She didn't respond right away. A few weeks later, she sent a short message saying she understood and that she hoped we could talk again someday. Since then, we've exchanged a few careful messages here and there. Nothing deep, nothing like before, but it's a start. I'm willing to see where it goes, as long as she keeps showing up honestly. Gerald has never apologized. He calls once in a while, usually around the holidays, but the conversations are short and stiff. He talks to me like I'm the one who wronged him, like my refusal to bail him out was a betrayal worse than anything his family did to me. I don't argue with him anymore. I just let him believe whatever he needs to believe. Suzette and I have not spoken at all. I doubt we ever will. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. What I've learned from this whole experience is that love and obligation are not the same thing. For 30 years, I confused the two. I thought that if I just kept giving, kept showing up, kept sacrificing, eventually I would earn my place in the family. But you can't earn something that should be given freely. You can't prove your worth to people who have already decided you don't have any. I'm 55 years old. I have a small circle of friends who treat me with kindness and respect. I have a quiet life that I've built on my own terms. I travel when I want to. I spend my money on things that bring me joy instead of bailing out people who don't appreciate it. I wake up in the morning without dreading a phone call asking for another favor. The family that erased me taught me the most important lesson of my life. You can't make people value you by giving them more. You can only value yourself enough to stop giving to those who never deserved it in the first place. I used to think being family meant sacrifice. Now I know it means being seen, and I refuse to be invisible ever again. If you want more stories, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from.